What's up guys, and welcome back to Gabe Miller Music. Today I'm going to be talking about my favorite plugins for electronic music production and beyond that I use on a regular basis. Think of this not only as plugin recommendations, but as mini plugin reviews and demonstrations. And this list is presented in no particular order. This is not ranked. This is just a rundown of stuff that I really like and use a lot. So, to start the list off, this one will probably be no surprise because this is a very normie pick, but X for Records SERUM. I love this plugin. Its visual interface makes it incredibly intuitive. Whether you're an experienced sound designer or a beginner, I like using it for demonstration purposes because it's very well laid out in terms of seeing exactly what each parameter does. And that's really helpful as both a learning tool and as a sound design tool. Its set of filters is gigantic and pretty sweet. It's largely responsible for a lot of the sound of current bass music, which is definitely worth something. Its custom wavetable ability is awesome and opens up whole new possibilities for both new and experienced sound designers. Its effects rack is pretty sweet, and because it's currently one of the most popular plugins out there, it's got a ton of presets and tutorials available for it. So you can find pretty much any sound you need on this thing, whether it's how to make it or it's pre-made. And did I mention that SERUM is super versatile as well? So I love this thing, and with Splice's rent-to-own model, it's actually affordable for people, so I always recommend this synth. If you can only get one synth plugin, in my opinion, you should make it SERUM. Another X for plugin I can't live without is LFO Tool. This one I use mostly as a replacement for sidechained compressors. Sidechain compression is of course a staple of electronic music, especially electronic dance music, and it's a really useful technique if you actually set it up and route it with the compressor sidechained to a kick. However, I like having more control over the exact envelope that the ducking follows, and LFO Tool allows you to do that. It gives you a ton of control. You can just slap it on any element and get a perfect 4-on-the-floor pumping effect and really dial that in depending on the genre of music and the sound you're going for. And you can assign it to follow MIDI notes as well if you're doing something that demands a bit more complex ducking. Plus, because of its envelope and filtering capabilities, I also use it to shape sounds, such as shortening kick or snare tails, or even a bit of extra sound design to make a sound a little more interesting or even a bit wacky. Lately, I've been using it a little less than I have because I've been using crossfades for ducking, because that has a very similar effect, but it means I don't have to set up MIDI routing for LFO Tool, but I still use LFO Tool a ton, and I've gotten a ton of use out of it. And one more X for plugin. I promise they're not sponsoring this video and that this isn't going to be all X for plugins, but I do use their free OTT on pretty much every master track at just like 10 to 20%. A lot of producers do this, and it adds just a bit of extra compression and polish to a master. Moving on to other effects plugins, and most of these are pretty affordable. Audio Assault's DEFACER is a fantastic distortion. I tried this one out on a discount, and I think it's worth paying the whole price for it. For me, it's my go-to distortion. It's got a great bit crusher in it, and it's got 2 tracks of distortion with also a rectify feature that allows for some kind of glitching distortion, and you can combine both tracks of distortion, and you can mix and match different distortion parameters and get some truly disgusting sounds with it. I love to use it on drums to bring out some grit, and I love to use it on synths to make some really nasty distorted stuff. Whether or not you make heavy music, DEFACER by Audio Assault is a really good plugin. There's your gurgly bass, and I kind of like it, but it also is kind of gross, and I'm guessing it's a bit much. So first thing I did, cut a bunch of high end. And then I added another plugin I've been digging lately. So let's start with it off and then I'll turn it on. You can hear what it does. Another great Audio Assault plugin that won't be needed by everyone, but I do really love, is their plugin DRUMINATOR. And this is a drum emulation plugin, like a real drum kit. As a bit of a metalhead, I have dabbled in making metal, and this plugin is my go-to. It's much more inexpensive than a lot of other plugins out there, like Addictive Drums or Steven Slate Drums, but it sounds really good. It's got this punchy snare, fat kick, great cymbals. I love this plugin. There's also a free plugin by a different manufacturer called MT Power Drum Kit, which is also very good for rock and metal. And if you're trying to add some real drums to your electronic music, that's a really good free plugin to go for as well. I've used both of these drums plugins that I've mentioned extensively, both for making metal and for making electronic music, and I heartily recommend both of them. They're great. Another effects plugin that I really like is Super VHS by Baby Audio. They sent this over a little while ago, they're friends of the channel, and I quickly fell in love with this plugin. Basically, it makes your stuff sound like it was on an old VHS tape or an old cassette tape. It's got this stereo widener, which they have a version of just that for free, which is really good, and I recommend just getting that because it can take kind of a lifeless sound and make it super wide and exciting sounding. And it's also got a saturator built in, which I found myself using quite a bit, and it gives you some kind of tape style warble, like a pitch warble, which can really bring a sound to life and make it sound more analog. It's definitely an exaggerated effect, but I like that about it. It gives sounds some character, so I find myself reaching for this one a lot these days. So I'll play a little bit without and then drop it in. Moving on to a completely different kind of plugin, the next plugin that I really like is Melody Sauce. And this is something I try not to rely on too much because it's a melody generator. It spits out MIDI based on its understanding of how music and lead lines and melodies should work, and you can use that as inspiration. A lot of the times the stuff it spits out right out of the gate is kind of janky and robotic, so you have to modify it, but often if I'm in a songwriting rut and just cannot come up with anything new or catchy, I'll mess around in Melody Sauce and use what it spits out to spark an idea. And I'll often end up modifying it heavily, but it's great for jump-starting creative inspiration. I try not to rely on it as a crutch, and so I use it sparingly. And also, full disclosure, they did sponsor a video on this channel a while back, but they're not sponsoring this video. This is just a plugin that once they sent it and I did the video, it stuck for me, and I've come back to it every now and again when I'm really feeling like I need some ideas. Up next is my go-to free limiter plugin, and this is called LOUDMAX. Just all around super solid brick wall limiter, very, very simple to use, and I've gotten good results out of it. Not a whole lot more to say on it beyond that. These next couple of plugins are pretty niche and meant to fill pretty specific purposes, so take this next part with a grain of salt. The first one of these is SHREDDAGE 2, which is, in my opinion, the best electric guitar emulation plugin. As I mentioned before, I've dabbled in making metal, and while I've learned a little bit of guitar, I can play some super basic power chords with some palm muting and call it a gent song, but I can't really play complicated riffs or solos or anything like that. So SHREDDAGE allows me as a non-guitarist to program guitar parts and actually have them sound realistic enough. And it's on a 7-string, so you can do some pretty heavy chugging riffs, and I use that in conjunction with Audio Assault's Grind Machine, which is an amp simulator, which is quite inexpensive. And if you combine SHREDDAGE 2, Grind Machine, and DRUMINATOR, plus SHREDDAGE 2 bass, you've got a whole virtual rock or metal band, which for me personally, as someone who has always wanted to be in a rock or metal band but has never had the opportunity, using these plugins to become a one-man metal band has been super fulfilling and super exciting. The other plugin that's kind of specific is Jupe 8.5 by Arturia, which is an emulation of Roland's old Jupiter 8 synth. I am also really into synthwave and kind of 80s inspired electronic music, and this really lets you get that sound. It's not for everyone, you definitely don't need this to even get vintage style sounds, but I really like the way it sounds, and I love using its factory presets, which are emulations of the original synth's factory presets to make synthwave, retrowave, synth pop, and that kind of thing. This is a bit of a controversial pick. People who grew up with the original analog synths often say that the digital emulations sound kind of dry and sterile, but for me personally and my own purposes, I really like the way they sound, and it's the closest that people like me are going to get to using that kind of gear. And finally, a couple of honorable mentions because they're new to my arsenal and haven't stood the test of time yet, but I have been enjoying them lately. Scalar 2 by Plugin Boutique. They did a sponsored video with me recently, and I was genuinely impressed by the plugin and its ability to break you out of a songwriting rut by working in new chords and scales. And Kick and Snare by Together Audio. These I actually haven't even done a video on yet. I've got one on the way, and these allow you to make kick drums and snare drums from scratch, which is awesome. This is something I've wanted to dabble in for a while, but haven't taken the time to learn, and these make it super easy and intuitive while still giving you a ton of control over the exact parameters of your drum sounds. So at some point I'll probably put out a sample pack of stuff. I'll get there eventually, but right now I've been having a ton of fun making kick and snare sounds and building up my arsenal of drum sounds that I made myself. And to take those even further, I'll layer them with Foley that I've recorded, like hitting different things or dropping stuff, process them with some of the other effects that I mentioned in this video, like Super VHS or DEFACER. And that is the list. If you've got another plugin that either was or wasn't on this list that you really love, be sure to leave it in the comments below. Let's have this video be a great resource for anyone looking for inspiration or effects or synths or any kind of plugin that is really good and really useful. If you'd like to see a video where I rank the hardware music gear that I own, you can click or tap up over here. And if you'd like to see another video that YouTube thinks you'll like, you can click or tap down over here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back with a new video in a little bit. Peace.